In this video, we're going to take a look at how to configure Duo Multifactor Authentication with Cisco ISE, or the Identity Services Engine. However, we're not going to use the Duo Authentication Proxy in this particular demonstration. That is because we have some new additions that have been made to Cisco ISE, and we no longer need to leverage the Duo Authentication Proxy. So let's jump in and take a look at some changes. So as of ISE version 3.3 patch 1, which was released in December 2023, we now have the ability to configure Duo Multifactor Authentication directly using Cisco ISE. So we don't need to have a separate server for the Duo Authentication Proxy. Traditional methods would involve the Duo Authentication Proxy and communication between that proxy and ISE to carry out that multi-factor authentication. And although it worked seemingly well, you would have to, or customers would have to, spin up a separate server just for the Duo Authentication Proxy, or install that on another machine that's already available. So with this addition or this enhancement, we don't have to do that no more. Now, it's worth pointing out that as of 3.3 patch 1, this is still classified on the Cisco documentation as being in beta. However, it is available to use. And as I said, this allows Cisco customers, or Cisco ISE customers and Duo customers, to integrate Duo MFA without the need for that Duo Authentication Proxy. So it just removes that element of additional configuration and spinning up a new server or configuring another server when you've already got Cisco ISE, which can now take care of that multi-factor authentication element. So the primary authentication is still going to be carried out by ISE, and the secondary authentication is going to be carried out by Duo. So what I mean by that is that when a user comes to authenticate, their credentials are going to be validated, let's say against Active Directory, and then once those credentials have been validated, then Duo will carry out that multi-factor authentication element. This does address the same use cases as the standalone proxy, as pointed out. So you've got the VPN user authentication, and we have the TACACS plus authentication type as well. Now, there is authentication per second limitations for TACACS currently, depending on the deployment type. So small, medium, large deployments, for example. Do take a look at the Cisco documentation if that is something that you are possibly going to be working with and may be concerned about. You can take a look at that in more detail just to see what those authentications per second are. But nevertheless, the point being is that we now have the ability to do this without the authentication proxy, or the Duo Authentication Proxy. If you are interested in configuring Cisco ISE and the Duo Authentication Proxy side by side separately, I have a bunch of videos already on my YouTube channel, Network Wizkid. So depending on where you're watching this video, just head over to that channel and search for those videos, because there is a few different ways that you can actually configure this and a few different benefits that you get from each different configuration. So with this new modification to ISE, we currently have the ability to support Duo Push as a second factor, and also phone calls as well. So I'm hoping in the future we get to see some more different methods, authentication methods that we can use to carry out that multi-factor authentication. But as of doing this video, they're the two methods that are supported. So there's a few prerequisites before getting started. One is that we need to make sure that our ISE deployment has Advantage licenses. So do check that before you plan to carry this integration out. In terms of Duo licensing, we should be able to work with any of the licenses aside from the free tier, of course. So we've got the Duo Essentials, we've got the Advantage, and we've got the Premier plan that supports the admin API and auth API integrations. Then we need to make sure that Active Directory is integrated with ISE for that primary authentication. And then lastly, we need to enable ISE Open API as well within ISE as well. So we'll take a look at these things when we get to the demonstration. The configuration steps are pretty straightforward. I've tried to simplify them into 5 steps. So the first one being configuration of the Duo Authentication API and the admin API from the Duo admin panel. And then we would move on to configuring ISE and the external identity sources. Then we'd configure the Duo authentication parameters. Then we'd configure the identity synchronization, which we'll take a look at. And then lastly, we finish off with the creation of the MFA policies for Radius, which is used for the VPN, or for TACACS for the device administration piece. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll jump into the demo, and our demo is going to focus on the Radius piece when we come to configuring and testing that sort of access with Duo. So we'll take a look at that, and maybe in upcoming videos we can take a look at the TACACS piece. But for now, we'll sort of run through the process of how to enable this within ISE and get it configured using Radius. All right, so we're going to start off here now with our Duo admin panel, and we're going to head over to applications. And what we need to do is we need to first protect an application, and then we'll just type in admin API here, or admin, and the Duo admin API will come up. So if we just type or press, protect, and we're going to need the integration key, secret key, and API host name shortly. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change this name to admin API ISE demo, just because I have a few other demo ones, so I don't want to be getting confused here. And in terms of granting permissions for this API, we just want to select grant read resource and also grant write resource. You can leave all the rest. And then what we'll do is we'll just save that for now. And if we could then go back to applications and protect an application, we'll now do the auth API. And again, we'll need those details after, but I just want to first of all rename this so that we don't get confused a little bit later down the line. So what I'll do now is I'll just save that for now. We might come back and add some policies, etc. afterwards, but I just wanted to get those created first of all. And then once we've done that, we can then navigate over to ISE. So if we go over to our ISE instance here, and this is a standalone ISE 3.3 patch 1 instance. So we'll log into the standalone. If you have got distributed deployment, access the primary policy admin node. And once logged in, let's just click off of that. We just need to first check a few things, and if you already have ISE running in your environment, then it's likely you're already going to have your external identity sources configured for Active Directory. If you don't, then please do make sure you configure those. We're not going to go through those in this demonstration, but I just wanted to show you that this is configured here, and this is also a prerequisite. As you can see here, we've got the operational status there for this domain controller, which is great. So that one is Active Directory, and that's added. We've also got our groups synchronized as well, which is good. And those groups are going to be where the user, our test user, is going to come from. So you can see here I've got two groups. I've got a Duo user group, and I also have the standard domain user group as well. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go across to, if we go to settings here, and we go to external identity source settings, you can see we have a few different options here, and we need to make sure that we enable both of these. So we need to enable the REST ID store, and we also need to enable the multi-factor authentication. And you can see here, as I mentioned earlier, this also shows as being a beta as well at the moment. So what we'll do is we will save that, and then once we've done that, we'll just go across to administration, system. You can see now that's saved at the bottom right, and we need to go now to, let's go to our settings, and if we just scroll down here under endpoint scripts, we should see API settings, and we need to make sure that it gives you a bit of information about the API itself. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that the ERS read write is on, and once we've done that, we also need to make sure that Open API read write is on as well. So if you have a distributed deployment, you will get another drop down menu here just for the other nodes that you have, and it'll be the same setting just to enable read access for each of those as well if you want to turn it on. But once you've done that, it's just going to ask us if we're sure that we want to save these settings, and we're going to say yes. All right, that's cool. So now we've done that, let's go to administration, and then if we go under identity management, and then we go to external identity sources again, you can see now that we have another option now for MFA. And what we can do is we can add a connection here for multi-factor authentication now, as you can see. So there's some steps, pretty much what I went through in the presentation, but it's just telling us that we're going to integrate with Duo for VPN access for the users and TACACS for the admins. We've already signed up and signed into our Duo account, so we're good there. We've already done the admin and auth API within Duo, and now we're going to need these secret keys and integration keys and stuff. So once we get to this stage, we now need to go through this wizard. So you can see we've got a wizard which gives you some instructions on what you're going to have to do. We'll just say, let's do it. Let's give our connection a name. So we'll just call this MFA demo with an underscore, of course. And then we're going to need now our API host name and our integration key and secret key as well. So you can see we've got the admin API, and we've also got the authentication API, so we'll need both of those as well. API host name is the same for each, so we could just use this API host name here. So if we just copy that and we put this into here, and then we'll do our auth API first because we're on there. So if we copy the integration key and we put that into here, again, make sure these details are not shared because this is specific to your environment. This is just a demo, so these will be deleted afterwards. Copy the secret key, and that'll paste into there. And then we just lastly need to get the integration key and this secret key for the admin API. So if we just go back here, and it was that one, admin API ISE demo. And again, if we just copy that integration key, pop that in there, and then we copy that secret key and we put that in there, we should now be good to test that connection. So now you can see that it's telling us when we test that connection that the auth and admin API integration and secret keys are valid. That's good. So now let's press next. And now we need to choose where we want to synchronize our identity from for our primary authentication. So we're going to select this one for our demo. And we need to give it a name. So let's just call it Demo ISE AD sync. And then now we're going to select the group. So if we select the group here and we say we're going to use the Duo users group, let's say next, and then last of all, you get the summary, you press done, and then yeah, you should be good. So I pressed through that a little bit quick there, but once that's done, you can see under MFA that we have our MFA demo that we've just created, and you can click through the settings just to validate and change anything if anything has not been configured correctly. So that's it from the ISE side pretty much. So you can see the wizard really makes it quite straightforward to do essentially. So what we need to do now is we just need to validate a few things within Duo. It's been a little while since the holidays that I've actually been into this demo account. We want to make sure that we have our test user. So you can see we've got a Duo test user here. And let's just see if this one... So this one's being synchronized from our Active Directory source. So this is good. So this is the user that we'll use to test access to our VPN. So that's great. So what we need to do now is we just need to set up some policies within ISE. And just before I do that, let me just make sure this user has no device associated. So we're going to have to enroll this user with a device before we can do that. And I'll just add one in the background before we actually test that authentication. But you can see there that this is being synchronized from users actually. So it's not synchronized from Duo. So just to actually make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to select that group as well, just so that we don't run into any issues there. All right, so once that's done, like I say, we might as well stay on ISE here. And if we just go to our policy sets, what we need to do now is we create we've got that default policy set, but what we'll do now is we'll create a new policy set. We'll call this one ISE MFA demo, and what we're going to do is we'll just say do the good old radius virtual for the port type. So let's just go on to attributes, and then if we go down to radius, let's see if we can search port type here. There we go, and we'll choose virtual for our VPN. Let's just save that. Oops, not save it there. Save it here, or use it here. So we've got our radius NAS port type equals virtual. Obviously, if this is a live environment, you could choose to have it at that or make it more specific. But what we're going to do now is we're going to select our allowed protocol. So we'll just say default network access there. And then once we save that, we'll go into the actual policy itself. So let's just expand this here. So under authentication, we'll just leave this as what we got here. Authentication policy. So we don't need that, actually, it's here. So we got this new section here, MFA policy here. And what we'll do is we'll add a new policy here. So you can see it gives us MFA rule 1. You can obviously change that name if you choose to do so. I'll just leave it at that. And then what we'll do here from the list, we'll specify which MFA identity source we use. And that's the one that we created a little bit earlier on. So we'll select that. And then we just need to define the conditions to obviously match against that for the VPN. So I need to check whether I have that VPN device in ISE at the moment. So what we can do is if we go to device type, and let's just say let's just say device type all, because we're not, and I've done that again, because we're not using anything else. So I'll just say device type all, and then it's going to match against that there. And then what we'll do is on the authorization policy, let's just change this for simplicity for this demo. Instead of deny, we'll just leave that as permit as well, just so that we can see, so we don't have to create a new one with some more conditions. So once that's done, let's just save that there. Let me just make sure yeah, that should be fine. And what I need to do now is I just first need to check whether our firewall that we're going to be using is in Duo. And I don't think it is. So what we'll do is we'll add our firewall. So we have one of our firewalls here. I'm just going to check the IP of this firewall. And we'll add this into here. So let's call this Duo FTD1. Let's call it that. And then the IP address, we'll give it, as 161.17250. And then we'll leave all the rest apart from radius. So we'll give this a super secret of Cisco, just for the purpose of this demonstration. And then we'll save that there. So we've got our new Duo FTD device added there. And now what we'll do is we'll actually go and make sure that we've got this configured. I don't think it is configured. So we need to make sure that the FTD device in this instance is configured correctly for remote access. So let's just add a new remote access VPN here and go through the wizard. So let's call it ISE demo or ISE Duo demo. And we're going to select this Duo FTD. We'll leave the VPN protocols as they are. Let's just reassign these. It's just because I've got that previous configuration. Now, when we get to authentication, authorization, and accounting, we're going to do AAA only. Our authentication server is going to be that of Cisco ISE in this instance now, not the Duo Authentication Proxy. So we'll just say 151.7.1.1 in this demo. 51.7.1.1. Don't think I've added it actually. So let me just quickly add this ISE. Let's just say ISE 001. And let's let's add in, making sure everything else is in place there. Let's add in the server, so 18.12.151.711, and we'll give it that key of Cisco that we gave it on ISE. And once we're done there, we can just go ahead and save that. So we've got that in there now. Let's just save that. Now we can use that there as well. I thought you had it configured, but obviously not. So that's fine. Let's use, have we got any pools configured already? Yeah, let's just add these pools quickly. And then we'll use the default group policy. Let's go next. Let's use the secure client image that we already have for Windows. And then our interface is going to be our Duo FTD outside security zone, I believe it is. And we'll use VPN self-signed. Hopefully that one works. And yeah, let's go next there. Just trying to zoom through the VPN configuration. Hopefully that's fine. Hopefully that works. And once that's done, we can pretty much test. I just need to now add in the background that phone associated with our test user, and then we should be good to test. So while I do that in the background, I'm just going to push these configuration changes to that Duo FTD device. And then once that's done, we should be able to test. So now that's complete, we should be all good. I've added my device so that we can test. So what we'll do is we'll come off that and look to test now. Let's just go back to ISE. And then we'll go back to our Radius live logs here. And then we'll look for, let's just look for the last 5 minutes. And we'll refresh every 3 seconds just as part of this test so we can see those logs. All right, so just returning from a quick break now. So we have the Radius live logs up, and now we're going to connect to the VPN, and we're going to go through the multi-factor authentication and make sure everything's configured correctly. So I already have the Cisco Secure Client installed, so I'm just going to type in the actual outside interface IP address of the FTD, which is 192.168.10.5 in this case. Just give that a moment to connect. There we go. So we'll just connect anyway. I have the user, so that's the group that we created on the FTD, and we've got that user, Duo test user 1, that we're making use of. That user is in Duo, enrolled with a device for multi-factor authentication, and ISE can also communicate and validate the credentials for this particular user. So we'll go ahead and we'll put in this password here, and then we'll press OK. And then we'll give that a second. We should start to see things come through on ISE momentarily. In the meantime, I should get a, yep, I've just got the multi-factor authentication to my device now. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to approve that now. You can see we've got something come through there. We'll ignore that one because that's from the management interface of the device. But as you can see now, we have successfully connected to that VPN, and we also have some logs that have come through on ISE. So we'll take a look at those. Let me just disconnect from that VPN real quick, and let's minimize that. And if we click on the authentication report, you can see there now that we have the authentication succeeded. We can see the username, the endpoint ID, which is the MAC address. We can see the authentication policy and authorization policy that we've matched against. And we can see that the result is permit for the authorization. We can see there that we have the management IP address that we added in the devices in ISE. We can actually see that the communication or the NAS IPv4 IP address is the outside interface of that particular firewall in this instance. We can see there we have all the processing, all the logs, everything that's been through before authentication. We can see there that we've got that multi-factor authentication, which has been successful, but then you also see the timing, and that's just because obviously I was taking my time to go through that authentication process, but nevertheless it will show you the latency there for that particular flow as well. So that was it. Connecting to the VPN. We know now everything's configured successfully. We connected to the VPN successfully. We can see the logs in ISE. And lastly, if we was to go to our reports in Duo, we can see, let's just turn off there. You can see as well with the timestamp, and we can see that the user's been granted access, and we can see that it's the Auth API which has prompted us for that multi-factor authentication. That's what popped up on the device. I accepted that, and yeah, we can see there that we've been granted that access there with some other bits and pieces of information there. So essentially the admin API is used to set up that communication, if you like, between ISE and Duo, and then the authentication API or the Auth API is used for the multi-factor authentication. And yeah, that's all there is to it, really. So I hope you found that video useful. A couple of things I would suggest if you are going to follow along. Make sure that you modify your timers for your VPN connection so that you're not receiving multiple radius requests in a certain amount of time. I would say at minimum change your timer to 60 seconds, gives users enough time to authenticate, and then make sure that you've got the correct VPN profiles, etc., in place as well. I will in upcoming videos probably look at focusing on using TACACS with this same flow, with making use of the new multi-factor authentication built into ISE. So do look out for that on my YouTube channel, and if you got any questions, just leave me a comment on my video, and I always try to get back to everybody. But thank you for watching.